I'm Brittany, this is Shenwei, and welcome to Gaywatch, where we watch gay things. So sorry for the late start. The wife is trying her best to recover from a health condition, and damn if it's just not being an absolute bitch to get rid of. So she is in some discomfort. If you would like to send her some love, please do. I will be showing her everything that you guys say. So please send some love her way. She's kind of going through it. But now that we're here, and we will still be going for the full time, even though we're getting a late start. So it's still going to be the usual. We read for 2 hours. We take a break somewhere around in the middle. And please no spoilers in the chat below, because there's always at least a few people who are reading along for the very first time like I am, though I have seen the show. We are on page 55 for chapter 5 of volume 3 of Guardian, which I'm just now realizing I didn't say at the very top. We're continuing through volume 3 of Guardian, and we are on page 55 for chapter 5. Alrighty. When Da Qing saw first Zhao Yunlan and then Zhu Hong enter the office, he jumped onto a table, carrying Record of Ancient Secrets in his mouth. He ignored the weird vibe between the two of them and set the book down. This book absolutely stinks of death. I did some research. As I expected, it came from Antique Street. Zhao Yunlan picked the book up and brushed his hand over the cover, wiping the cat's saliva away. Antique Street, huh? Antique Street was true to its name. It was full of shops dedicated to all manner of antique objects and artifacts, even if most of them were fakes. Every once in a while, a burial object that had been illegally unearthed from a grave site would pop up, but this copy of Record of Ancient Secrets obviously came out of a modern printer, not exactly relic material. So the stink of death Dutching had mentioned had to be due to something else. One little shop down at the end of Antique Street not only sold a variety of superstitious objects, but also guarded the pagoda tree at its entrance. This tree was a transportation hub linking the realms together. For example, anyone going from the mortal realm to the Yao market or from the mortal realm to the netherworld had to pass through there. The pagoda tree's levels reached up into the mortal realm, while its roots sank down into the Huangquan. It was an awe-inspiring plant, neither mortal nor ghost. So you're saying this book came from the netherworld? Zhao Yunlan asked. At the black cat's nod, he continued, "Who bought it and brought it here?" The cat licked his paws. "No idea. I can't find a record of the purchase. Perhaps the previous Perhaps the previous Gar. Impossible." He gets cut off. Impossible. Zhao Yunlan flipped through the book, which had neither an ISBN nor any publication details. Looking at the printing and typeset quality as well as the age of the paper, it was printed in the 90s at the earliest. There's no way it's older than I am now. "In that case, it must be a black-covered book," said Dutching. A black-covered book was one that had been purchased by a book buyer who could work only at night, obtained through certain means from somewhere other than the mortal realm. Daching flipped the book open with a paw. As soon as he pressed his paws down on the paper, mysterious dark mist suddenly swirled through the pages. Whoever smuggled it in here was very careful. Nobody noticed it on our end. Books at the Special Investigation Department were meticulously organized. The spine of each book had been marked with color-coded labels and special barcodes, which was why Sangzan was able to shelve them correctly despite his illiteracy. Given that, how had this book about ancient gods wound up among the books about Nua's creations of humans and how she had repaired the sky? Was it pure coincidence, or had someone predicted that Zhao Yunlan would be looking up that information? There's an ominous scene break for you. Damn. As night fell, Zhao Yunlan finally gave in and called Shen Wei, but what answered was a cold, robotic female voice. "The number you have dialed is not in service." 1 day apart is akin to the passing of 3 autumns. He stared blankly at his phone screen for a while, savoring the bitter taste of that idiom, until Da Qing came over and nudged his elbow impatiently with an extended paw. "Now's not the time to dwell on your love life. If you want to go to Antique Street, let's go." Zhao Yunlan picked up the cat and walked out. As he set foot outside, he saw Ju Hong already waiting silently by the car. He opened his mouth to speak, but Ju Hong beat him to it. Do you think I'm degrading myself, following you around after what happened earlier? After a beat, Zhao Yunlan said, I was just going to remind you to wear your down jacket. The atmosphere was intensely awkward as the two humans and the cat drove to Antique Street in the middle of the night. They followed the familiar path to the pagoda tree, where they found two pale white paper lanterns hanging at the entrance of the little store. Each lantern held a pea-sized light, and the lanterns themselves were so weather-worn that it was nearly impossible to make out what was written on them. With some effort, the words soul guarding were just barely discernible. Zhao Yunlan suddenly tapped the black cat perched on his shoulder. Keeping his voice low, he asked, what exactly does the soul guarding and soul guarding order mean? Guard the souls of the living, bring peace to the hearts of the dead, atone for crimes done in life, and complete the unfinished cycle. Da Qing's glance was heavy with judgment. It's written right on the back of the soul guarding order, isn't it? Are you blind? For once, Zhao Yunlan didn't offer a snappy comeback. Instead, he mumbled, but why is the order Kunlun Jun left behind called soul guarding? Why not mountain guarding, sea guarding, or monsters and demons guarding? And what exactly was the life and death Shenong kept mentioning in his dreams? Zhao Yunlan couldn't figure it out. His heart was heavy as he stepped into the pagoda tree. Following the trunk all the way down would take one to the banks of the Huangquan. The Huangquan Road ran down the center of the Huangquan River. Paved with long stone slabs, the narrow path sloped upward, like the legendary path to heaven. The air was so cold there that it seemed the river itself should be crusted with ice. Anyone setting foot on it hardly dared to breathe for fear of startling the resentful souls sharing the road. Those dull-eyed souls shuffled along, shepherded by reapers. All around them, the waters of the Huangquan swirled and gurgled. Occasional bubbles broke the surface, as though something could burst up from the depths at any moment. Little oil lamps stood on either side of the road, similar to streetlights. There was one of these soul-guarding lamps every 3 meters or so, each giving off a tiny glow that cast long shadows. Spider lilies bloomed in vivid red, coloring the path in clusters. Some time back, Zhao Yunlan had read a travel diary that mentioned these soul-guarding lamps that served to light the way for the dead. The length of the Huangquan Road depended on how many indelible memories were carved into an individual's heart. The glow of those lamps cleansed a soul of everything that connected them to the mortal realm. By the time a soul reached the Naihe Bridge and had had everything from this life and the ones before washed away with a bowl of Mengpo's soup made from the waters of the Huangquan River, they were ready for the next life. Zhao Yunlan couldn't help bending down to study a soul-guarding lamp. 4 words were engraved neatly at its base. Life begins at death. Suddenly, something seemed to flash before his eyes. There was an abrupt and excruciating pain in his heart, as though someone had reached in and torn a piece out. Ju Hong steadied him from behind when he stumbled. Barely audible, she murmured, "What's wrong?" Zhao Yunlan's face was deathly pale. He swallowed, choking down the blood welling up in his throat. Pressing a hand to the left side of his chest, he shook his head. "Nothing. Let's keep moving." "Nothing? Let's keep moving?" Nothing. Let's keep moving. When they reached Ghost City, Zhao Yunlan took out a few leaves of illusion. The 3 of them each tucked one into their mouth. A leaf in the mouth would keep them from smelling like living beings, and thus keep the city's little ghouls from realizing that they were alive. In addition to ghostly immortals and souls waiting for reincarnation, some of Ghost City's residents were unable to move on and be reincarnated, either because they were still clinging to something, or because they had sinned and were there serving their time. Once in Ghost City, they would remain for hundreds or thousands of years. Their obsession with life was beyond the comprehension of a living person. Once, when Zhao Yunlan had been inexperienced and arrogant, he'd come to the city in pursuit of a living soul who had entered it accidentally. Ultimately, he'd been unable to retrieve it. Instead, he'd witnessed how the little ghosts in the city had swarmed and mobbed the soul, sucking it dry. The Reapers had needed to call in reinforcements to quell the violent unrest. Zhao Yunlan had still been young at the time. After returning to the mortal realm, he'd had nightmares for a whole month and came close to being permanently traumatized. Close? Close. not permanently, close. The fact that the living could write what joy is there in life, what fear in death, which comes with a footnote, that is a line adapted from the writing of 4th century BCE philosopher Zhuangzi, was probably because the writer no longer remembered how it felt to die. The dead yearned for life as fervently as a drowning person yearned for air. It was instinctual and impossible to contain. Zhao Yunlan's thoughts ran away from him again, and what surfaced was, if this was what became of humans, then what about the Gui, who were born deep below the surface? What about Shen Wei? Shen Wei's harsh treatment of himself bordered on abuse. He seemed absolutely unwilling to take his own nature into account. Thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, enduring such endless yearning. How could he have done that to himself? You had to put it that way. Zhu Hong, on the other hand, had never been to Ghost City before. When she glanced uneasily at Zhao Yunlan, he came back to himself. No matter what happens, don't spit out the leaf of illusion, he cautioned quietly. Enough ants can kill an elephant. These little ghouls are way harder to get rid of than you'd think. She nodded hurriedly. Still worried, Zhao Yunlan shot her a look. By nature, snakes lack yang energy. This is no place for you. Maybe you should wait for me outside. No, don't be racist. Zhu Hong shook her head firmly. To be honest, she didn't know what good her presence could do, but she couldn't help feeling a bit more at ease if she kept him in sight, wherever he went. A general good rule with Zhao Yunlan, to be honest. We should probably have eyes on that man at all times. Da Qing jumped down from Zhao Yunlan's shoulder and led the way. Black cats and black dogs were all beings of both tremendous yin and tremendous violence. Any little ghouls who laid eyes on one would instinctively give them a wide berth, so having a black cat along was like having a police car to clear the way. It made sneaking into Ghost City easy as pie. As it was neither the 1st nor the 15th of the lunar month, Ghost City seemed somewhat desolate. At the intersection, a life-dealing crone squatted by the entrance with a basket by her feet. She hunkered down at the roadside, her beady, murky yellow eyes following the occasional passing ghost like an old person trying to eke out a living selling their wares in the mortal realm. She looked pitiful enough that Zhu Hong couldn't help but give her a second glance. The crone noticed and immediately broke out into a wide smile full of yellow teeth. "Come buy some life," she called. "Come buy some life." The crone's voice was hoarse and shrill, like tiny metal pieces scraping against bone. Zhu Hong broke out all over in goosebumps. Zhao Yunlan dragged her away at once. "Don't look," he muttered. "That crone has a bad reputation. She only sells duds." In spite of herself, Zhu Hong asked, "What does that mean?" "If you eat her longevity cake, it's not your natural lifespan that gets extended. Lying in bed in a vegetative state is also a kind of longevity. Got it?" Zhao Yunlan wrapped his coat tighter around himself and popped the collar. Because he insists on being hot about it. He lowered his voice even further. "Keep your eyes on the road. Don't look around too much. In a no-man's land like this, if your eyes linger, they'll mark you as a target. Don't make trouble." Zhu Hong didn't dare look around after that. She just walked forward, determined to stay focused. After passing through the long streets of the market, they came to an end and saw a small thatched cottage. A white paper sign on the door read, "Welcome," written in black ink. The hut was unmistakably in disrepair, but hanging by the door were 2 white lanterns that bore the words "Soul Guarding," just like the little shop on Antique Street. "The book most likely came from this store," the black cat said, looking back at them. "This family reincarnates once every 60 years, the yin alternating with the yang. The person in the yang realm guards the entrance to the Huangquan by the pagoda tree, while the person in the yin realm minds the general store in Ghost City." Zhao Yunlan entered first. The decrepit door creaked and opened easily when he pushed on it. He took a small mirror from his wallet and stuck it on the door before going inside. A little girl's voice rang out from within. "With a bright mirror to light the way, little ghouls don't enter," she recited. "This honored guest knows the rules well. Where do you come from?" Zhao Yunlan raised his chin, signaling to Zhu Hong to close the door. Someone lifted the curtain inside, and a little girl sporting pigtails walked out. She didn't stand even waist high on him, and her face was frighteningly pale. Her cheeks were blood red with cinnabar, her black bean eyes seemed somehow morbid, and her lips were a deep crimson. She wore an old-fashioned cotton coat. The result went far beyond not being cute. On the contrary, the effect of a child's voice coming from that face was flat out terrifying. Zhao Yunlan didn't beat around the bush. He took out Record of Ancient Secrets, pressed a soul guarding order down on it, and squatted so that his eyes were at the same level as the girl's. I have something to ask you, if you could please do me a favor. The little girl's gaze fell on the soul guarding order. Clearly, and with no trace of inflection in her voice, she said, So it's the Guardian blessing this place with his presence. How's my older brother? You're too kind. Your brother's doing well. Just a couple of days ago, I had someone send him a few pounds of cured meat for the new year, Zhao Yunlan said politely. I came today to ask if this book was purchased from your fine establishment. The girl took the book. Even from a palm's length away, the chill emanating from her body was palpable. Wherever she touched the book, a trace of frost lingered. She flipped through a few pages and nodded, Yes, this came from my store. She turned to the last page, revealing a gray seal in the most inconspicuous corner. If one looked closely, the words General Goods were just barely discernible. The little girl pointed at it and said, This is our store's private seal. Immediately, Zhao Yunlan asked, Could you look up who bought this book and brought it into the mortal realm? As he spoke, he took a stack of spirit money from his bag and ignited it with his lighter. Her eyes shone as she inhaled the scent, and she broke out into a stiff smile. The Guardian is kind. Please come in and have a cup of tea while you wait. The two people and the cat followed her into the dilapidated general store, where she poured them all tea. Zhao Yunlan lifted the cup and smelled it, going through all the motions of tasting it, even if he couldn't actually drink. Common sense dictated that living souls weren't to eat or drink anything that came from below the Huangquan. The little girl brought out an ancient thread-bound book from behind the table and skimmed through it, one page at a time. Ah, here we are. She looked up at Zhao Yunlan with a smile. I forgot to ask, what noble name should I use to refer to the current guardian? My surname is Zhao. Zhao Yunlan's brow furrowed as a bad feeling came over him. Just Zhao Yunlan is fine. This is right, then. The little girl pushed the giant account book toward him. The buyer's name was clearly recorded. Renwu year, 15th day of the 7th month. Guardian, Zhao Yunlan. End of the chapter! He bought the damn book himself. You know, we shouldn't be surprised. But here we are. We're on page 65 for chapter 6. For a moment, Zhao Yunlan just stood there, rooted to the spot. He didn't immediately dismiss what he was seeing. Finally, he said, Remind me which year Renwu was? The last Renwu year was 2002, the black cat replied. The one before that was 60 years earlier, well before you were born. What were you doing in 2002? I was struggling to stay on top of my secret duties as guardian and going to class at the same time. Zhao Yunlan thought for a moment. Between school and that side job, I was drowning. I was about to give up on university and just go work as some phony medium, but my dad stopped me. That was the year that he found the long-abandoned Special Investigations Department from some connections and got me installed there. Actually, hang on, was it really my dad who did that, or was it... Huh? Da Cheng, still in the dark about what Zhao Yunlan had learned, was confused. I'll fill you in after we get back, Zhao Yunlan said. He turned to the little girl running the general store. How do you verify a buyer's identity? You don't just let them write down whatever they want and take their word for it, right? An enigmatic smile crossed the child's stiff face. A 7 or 8-year-old girl with the expression of a powerful old woman from a wuxia novel might have been funny in any other context, but here in Ghost City of the Netherworld, the effect was a bit creepy. I keep clear, accurate accounts here, of course, she said. Every buyer's full name and identity are checked against the Book of Life and Death. Does the Guardian have any doubts? Zhao Yunlan gave it some thought, but realized he wasn't going to learn anything else from her. He put the book away. Do you remember what the me who came and bought that book 11 years ago looked like? A corner of her deep red lips curved up. In a meaningful tone, she said, A moment ago I couldn't remember, but now that the Guardian mentions it, it's coming back to me. Looking at you again, I've only just realized that you're a past visitor who's returned. If the Guardian hadn't mentioned it, I wouldn't have realized that it's been 11 years since then. Zhao Yunlan went very still as he processed what she was hinting at, that the Zhao Yunlan who'd originally bought the book had looked much the same as he looked now. Deep in thought, he lowered his head for some time before saying, "Many thanks." He turned and walked out, with Ju Hong close behind him. The girl called out lightly from behind the counter, stopping him in his tracks. Her crisp, childish voice dropped so low that it sounded unutterably ominous. "I'll be a busybody and offer a word of caution. It's possible that the Guardian could suffer a bloody disaster in the next few days. You do well to take care." Zhao Yunlan showed very little reaction. Ju Hong, on the other hand, quickly asked, "A bloody disaster? What do you mean by that?" The little girl only stared at them with her black, almost plastic-looking eyes. "Oh, that just triggered other mother memories. Thanks so much." Ju Hong moved as if to rush forward and ask more questions, but Zhao Yunlan stopped her. He gave the girl a nod and pulled Ju Hong away. I'm just reorienting real quick. "Wait," Ju Hong exclaimed. "She just said..." "The only reason she said anything at all is that I sent her brother some cured meat during Lunar New Year. How big a favor do you think a few pounds of meat can buy?" Zhao Yunlan walked swiftly out of the store, glancing at Ju Hong. "Even if she dared to say more, I wouldn't dare hear it. Courtesy and manners don't apply in Ghost City. Sometimes there isn't even logic. You can't judge the dead the same way you judge the living. Why do you think the Netherworld has them cordoned off here in this no man's land? Remember, it's not good to be indebted to the dead." "Why are you suddenly telling me all this?" Ju Hong asked. "I'm trying to teach you. I've never had many girls working for me. You're few and far between. I never wanted to force any of you to do legwork or interact with weirdos, but now I don't think that was the right move," Zhao Yunlan said quietly. "I never thought about you leaving one day. If I'd realized, I would have given you more chances to learn and train. Remember, without practical experience, it wouldn't matter if you cultivated until you're equal to the goddess Nua herself. You'd still be just some technical analyst working for me, and you'd never earn the respect of your milky-eyed elders who refuse to die." Ju Hong's nose and eyes reddened simultaneously. "Shh, keep the leaf in your mouth. Save your tears. When our whole department gets together for your farewell party, you can cry all you want. Ghost City is no place for it." Pushing Ju Hong behind him, Zhao Yunlan abruptly stopped talking. At some point, what seemed to be some sort of person had appeared by the general store's door, squatting on the long stone slabs. Whoa! Art! Creepy art. Creepy art. Unwelcome art. He or she, or it, was bald, with arms so long they went past its knees. Squatting on the ground, it looked like a hairless baboon. Its neck was nearly 30 centimeters long enough that if it lowered its head, its chin could touch its belly. It looked up at Zhao Yunlan, face splitting literally from ear to ear in a sudden smile. It stood and extended its neck, its head spinning 180 degrees. What had been the back of its head was now the front, revealing the classic ferocious features one expected from a horror story cryptid. It flung itself toward them. We're gonna go ahead and get the art over with now. But you know what the face reminds me of? Oh, this is not great. This is terrible. I hate it so much. But you know what the face reminds me of? The face in the description, oddly enough, takes me all the way back. This reminds me of something in a weird way that could be in that old kids series from when I was a kid that was like groups of scary stories. It may have literally just been called Scary Stories, where like the stories themselves weren't terribly creepy, I don't think, but the art was horrifying. The art was just god-awful, nightmare fuel terrible. I think it may have been like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark or something like that. That's what this reminds me of. Very, very specifically. Oh, yeah. See, I was right. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Yeah. And it's not even necessarily that the art is terribly similar. It's just the vibe. Zhao Yunlan had already drawn his gun, finger on the trigger. Just as he was about to shoot, the double-faced ghost came to a sudden stop in midair and fell to the ground. The double-sided head spun around again, facing them with the creepy smile. The smile exposed 2 yellowing front teeth with a gap between them. The ghost studied Zhao Yunlan, head swinging, and broke into a fit of giggles as it rocked back and forth. See? No! We were having a perfectly good time on the underworld, and now you're trying to come at me with some creepy shit. Zhao Yunlan didn't want to cause any trouble while they were here. Keeping his gun trained on the ghost, he signaled Zhu Hong to walk the other way. Keeping their distance from it seemed like the best plan. A wide berth, please. When the double-faced ghost saw that they were trying to leave, a hissing noise came from its throat. Humans and ghosts belong on separate paths, it said. Humans and ghosts belong on separate paths. The words landed like a blow to the heart. Zhao Yunlan instantly thought of Shen Wei. Expression darkening, he snapped his head around and stared at the giggling ghost. With ice dripping from his voice, he said, I've been exercising restraint here because I don't want to burn bridges with the netherworld, but you guys keep taking a mile when given an inch. The double-faced ghost's smile eventually vanished. It tilted its head, staring at him with its creepy face. Finally, Zhu Hong couldn't take it anymore. She tugged on his sleeve. Director Zhao, let's go. Veins stood out on Zhao Yunlan's gun hand. Just as he was about to take a step, the ghost suddenly spoke again. Do you want humanity or inhumanity? You must choose. Do you want to walk the mortal realm or tread the path of ghosts? You must choose. Do you want the world above or the abyss beneath? You must choose. Its voice grew in volume until it was piercingly loud. The words, you must choose, spread like waves through the cold, bleak streets of Ghost City, echoing everywhere. It lingered in his ears like an inescapable interrogation. The alliteration. Technically, that's not alliteration, because alliteration is about repeating consonants. There's another word for repeated vowels that I can't immediately summon. Oh, that's going to bug me. Countless ghosts and souls peeked out between dilapidated shingles, cracked rocks, and the ground itself. Their peering eyes gleamed with an eerie light as they whispered among themselves. With Zhu Hong accompanying him, Zhao Yunlan had to tread with more caution than he otherwise might. Forcing the fury in his heart back down, he started to lead her away. Assonance! Thank you, Epic! Hello? The double-faced ghost's head spun again, and its ferocious features now faced forward. Its voice rose into a scream that cut the air like an owl hooting at night. Live souls here! There are live souls here! The words were like water poured onto hot oil, a sizzle that became a conflagration. Zhao Yunlan opened fire, shooting right through the ghost's head. The special bullet immediately ignited beneath its skin, turning the creature to ash from the shoulders up. But it was too late. The words live souls had summoned mobs of little ghouls, their faces empty but voracious. They descended like a hunger-crazed pack of wild dogs, eyes burning with absolute insatiable need. Even the black cat whose fur stood on end wasn't enough to ward them off. Cursing under his breath, Zhao Yunlan blew the head off one of the ghosts at the head of the pack. The dead soul disappeared with a hysterical scream, but the others were completely undeterred. Not a single ghost spared a glance for their comrade, soul shattered beyond repair. They had lost all capacity for fear or reason. The streets that had been so empty were teeming now. More and more ghosts crawled out of unbelievable places, their numbers swelling. Zhao Yunlan was insufficiently armed, as he had only come to investigate a mystery. In no time at all, he was out of bullets. A massive python appeared at his side as Zhu Hong shifted into her true form, lashing out at the swarming ghosts and swallowing 4 or 5 in a single bite. But the stream of souls was endless. Some ghosts even climbed onto her, biting at her hard scales. She thrashed violently, flinging them away and striking at them with the weight of her tail, as wide as an adult's waist. But there were just too many of them. Opponents like the Yanlo Kings were easy to avoid, but wave after wave of little nuisances added up to big trouble. Zhu Hong snake form! Hello? Getting to be the badass that she is. The crazed ghosts were like jungle leeches, desperate to drain the living of their flesh, their blood, their life itself. 4 or 5 swarmed Juhong and were thrown down, only to rush her yet again. One even stepped on the snake's vulnerable spot, 7 inches down from her head, and tore off a scale with its long nails. An instant later, a fierce wind swept past. A palm-length dagger sheared through the head of the little ghost who was holding the bloodied scale. Even as the ghost disappeared into the wind, it still craned its neck and stuck out its tongue to try and get a taste of the fresh blood and flesh. Zhao Yunlan, knife in hand, gave the tip of Juhong's tail a light tug. Shrink down a little, hurry! He slashed the knife out horizontally, reducing a row of ghosts to dust. He quickly drew his arm back and, despite the danger, took 2 seconds to strip off his coat and hug it to his chest. The way he treasured the coat might have looked funny, but knowing the reason, Juhong couldn't laugh. She contracted down into a far smaller snake, only the width of a finger, and slithered into Zhao Yunlan's sleeve. There she coiled herself around his wrist. Zhao Yunlan bent down and grabbed hold of Da Qing, the ragged furball. Raising a wind-borrowing talisman in one hand, he lit it with the last true flame of Samadhi in his lighter. Vast gales and ferocious flames surged into existence, wind and fire reflecting each other. The city erupted with screams as the inferno descended. Zhao Yunlan didn't dare waste a single moment. Shielded by the true flame, he beat a hasty retreat to the exit, racing toward the gates, only to arrive and find them inexplicably shut. Zhao Yunlan whipped around and saw that the vicious ghouls, ravaged by starvation, had managed to swallow some of the raging true flames. All the ghouls who had gorged themselves on the fire transformed into wingless bird people. Stomachs distended, they flew into the sky where they exploded. It was a scene straight out of hell, and yet the remaining ghosts' appetites were unaffected. Drawn like moths to the flame, they rushed at the true flames of Samadhi in waves, somehow managing to bite the stream of fire in half. Da Qing gave a few yowls, reflexively clawing at Zhao Yunlan's hair. Fuck! What do we do? What choice do we have? Zhao Yunlan rubbed at his arm, where a ghoul had left 3 bloody scratches. We'll just have to force our way through. The true flames were starting to weaken and dwindle, the stream of flame breaking into segments, and then, out of nowhere, the soul-guarding whip appeared, and with a crack, tore fiercely through the lifeless sky above Ghost City. As soon as Zhao Yunlan had the whip in hand, a strange energy gathered there. Unfamiliar at first, but less so by the moment. The power felt as though it had always been his, as if it was a part of him. Something deep inside him was stirring, quickly awakening. A sudden blow struck the closed gates behind him. A figure clad entirely in black strode through the resulting person-shaped hole without so much as lowering his head. He grabbed Zhao Yunlan by the hand that held the whip, and the whip curled back onto Zhao Yunlan's arm. Juhong, still coiled around his wrist, caught the whip in her mouth. A long blade materialized in the newcomer's hand and shot out, aimed with ruthless will. A great boom annihilated nearly half the city's inhabitants. The stone slabs lining the streets began to shake and whir. Countless resentful ghosts shattered under the blade. He threw an arm around Zhao Yunlan's waist, all but dragging him out of the city through the hole in the gates and speeding away. In the blink of an eye, the ghouls in their territory were far behind them. Juhong, shocked and delighted, resumed her human form as soon as they reached safety. "My lord emissary!" Her great savior, the soul-executing emissary, dismissed her gratitude with a wave. Stiffly, he addressed Zhao Yunlan. "Why are you here?" The expressionless mask Zhao Yunlan had been maintaining, calm to the point of creepiness, finally gave way. Utterly exhausted, he let go of Da Qing, letting the fat cat drop to the ground. Then, with no concern for their surroundings, he wrapped his arms around the black-cloaked figure, who was feared and revered by all, and pulled him into a hug. In a hoarse rasp, he said, "Just come home." Poor Juhong, having only just returned to human form, wasn't quite steady on her feet. The shock of what she was seeing knocked her on her ass. Whew. That would be the end of the chapter. We're on page 75 for chapter 7. Whew. Damn. It's like we were just waiting. We're just waiting for Shen Wei to show up. It's like, anytime now, anytime you want to come grab your husband, that'd be fantastic. Really waiting to the last dramatic second there. Handshaking, Zhu Hong pointed at the soul executing emissary. He's Shen Wei, Decheng supplied, feeling rather superior. He looked at Zhu Hong, now sprawled on the ground, and cleaned his claws. Only pretending to be outwardly calm, he graciously gave the girl next to him a moment to begin reconstructing her shattered worldview. The emissary's hood fell back and revealed the elegant, refined features of Professor Shen, features that seemed wildly out of place in the current circumstances. After some time, he gently pushed Zhao Yunlan away, only to grab him by the wrist, brow furrowing at the sight of the scratches left by the little ghoul. Grip tightening, he opened his other hand and made a snatching motion. Impossibly thin threads of black emerged from the wounds and dispersed into the air. The gouges on Zhao Yunlan's arm began to heal at once. Not wanting to speak too much, Shen Wei avoided Zhao Yunlan's gaze and gave Zhu Hong a brisk nod. Let's leave this place first. But before they could go, a group of reapers came rushing toward them, followed by the magistrate, huffing and puffing. The 10 kings' butts might have been welded to their thrones, given their unwillingness to do anything but throw their weight around. All the actual work, errand running and general thankless tasks, inevitably landed on the magistrate's plate. The panting old magistrate directed the reapers to repair the city gates and contain the ghouls. There was even a clerk standing off to the side, wiping sweat from his face as he took inventory of everything. Ghosts of all kinds within the city had fallen beneath the soul-executing blade. Few were left standing. Shen Wei and Zhao Yunlan turned to leave, both tacitly ignoring the sudden bustle. Zhu Hong and Decheng hurried to keep up. Mopping at his forehead, the magistrate shouted from behind them, "My lord, great immortal, please wait!" Shen Wei turned back, wordlessly lifting a brow. Every soul in Ghost City, whether they're here to atone for sins or to await reincarnation, they must all be accounted for. My lord, you... I what? Shen Wei asked, voice gentle and dangerously mild. I can't kill them? The magistrate was unable to summon a response. Smiling, Shen Wei turned his head to the side. Without his glasses, there was something demonic about his eyebrows. The smile he wore could have chilled anyone down to the marrow. Tucking both hands into his pitch-black sleeves, he kept talking, his tone almost humble. Lord Magistrate, despite my low birth, my unworthiness, and how little my life has amounted to, before today I've heard of nothing in existence that the soul-executing blade cannot or should not sever. But if my actions have inconvenienced you in any way, well, you have my sincerest apologies, of course. Okay. The magistrate shuddered and forced his face into a wooden smile. Of course. Of course. After a long look and a frigid smile, Shen Wei pulled Zhao Yunlan away. Somehow, Shen Wei's expression seemed a bit unfamiliar to Zhao Yunlan. It might have been because he'd never seen this overbearing side of Shen Wei before. Once they'd covered a bit of ground, he looked back at the magistrate, who stood where they'd left him, dabbing his cold sweat. What was the Netherworld trying to do? Use that double-faced ghost to stop us? What good would that do them? Shen Wei's smile disappeared. Head lowered, he said nothing. Shen Wei, Zhao Yunlan grabbed him. Don't play dumb. I'm telling you to just come home with me. Say something. Until they'd reached the pagoda tree beside the Huangquan, Shen Wei held his silence. You should go, he said, very quietly. Having shed his hostility and coldness, he seemed tired. It's not good for the living to spend too long in the Netherworld. If you keep delaying, you'll fall ill upon your return. Zhao Yunlan let go of him and stopped moving. Shen Wei stood right in front of him, unwilling to turn around and face him. Teeth gritted, Zhao Yunlan snarled. I want to fucking drag you home and handcuff you so that you'll stay put. With his back still turned, so Zhao Yunlan couldn't see, Shen Wei suddenly smiled as though he'd just heard the most stirring, heartfelt, romantic declaration the world had ever known. Even the trace of gloom in his eyes turned gentle, as if about to melt. I mean, match your freak, you know? If I leave with you, will you take the medicine? He asked. Fuck off. Now, finally, he turned around and faced Zhao Yunlan. There was a quiet sigh before he said, I'm one of the Gui, Yunlan. No matter what Kunlun Jun did for me, no matter what, you made of me all those years ago. They're all empty titles. My nature is that of a Gui. From their first breath, the Gui were inauspicious. At the dawn of chaos, it was even said in the mortal realm that the mere sight of a Gui foretold a horrible death and an eternity without peace. Zhao Yunlan gazed back at him, fighting to contain the restless fury in his heart. I don't believe in that shit. Just come home with me and we can figure everything else out from there. Even if we can't be together, you have to at least be somewhere I can see you every day so I can rest easy. Where you can see me, Shen Wei echoed, very low. His narrow lips twitched as if trying to quirk up, but managed only a bitter smile. After a while, he said, voice still soft, Yunlan, I beg you, stop tormenting me so. In all my existence, my greatest regret is my carelessness in becoming entangled with you, and lacking the self-control to keep from making mistake after mistake. I think perhaps I'm simply not good enough. I'm too weak and lack the necessary willpower. I'm just going supernova. Hang on a second. A sudden suspicion made Zhao Yunlan throw himself toward Shen Wei, reaching out to grab hold of him, but his hands closed on empty air. Still facing him, Shen Wei retreated with such swiftness that he seemed to become only a streak of black shadow. As he disappeared before Zhao Yunlan's eyes, all that lingered were his final words, which also faded further and further into the distance. I won't be accompanying you any longer. Hurry and leave. The word leave resounded again and again, a repeated blow to the eardrums like an inauspicious curse. There was a moment when Zhu Hong thought Zhao Yunlan was about to cry, but in the next instant he'd brutally quashed it. The only remaining evidence was his reddened eyes. Staring in the direction where Shen Wei had vanished, Zhao Yunlan told Zhu Hong, You go back first. His voice was very calm. Take Dacheng with you. All right. You said you were leaving. Do you know when exactly? If so, let me know beforehand, and Wang Zheng can plan. Zhu Hong interrupted him. Director Zhao, what's happening? Zhao Yunlan waved, not wanting to say more. Nothing. Get going. Go where? I'm not going anywhere. Zhu Hong raised her voice. Why did he... Shen, the soul... She sighed in frustration. Whoever he is... Why did he say that? Why can't you guys be together? What medicine is he forcing you to drink? Why? Dacheng jumped onto Zhu Hong's feet. From his seat there, he looked up at Zhao Yunlan. There's an ancient saying that humans and ghosts belong on separate paths, but in all my years, I've never seen two people so truly desperate to be together, despite being separated by yin and yang. Some truths have existed since the beginning of time. Water will always flow downward, and the dead will always suck the life from the living. It may just be the natural order of things. It's so easy for a living being to lose their life and so hard for it to be returned. It can be returned only if one willingly offers up a part of themselves that's connected to their very spirit. As a king of the Gui, he was born to stand among the sages. He most likely doesn't have an inner core as the Yao do, so the only option left is blood from the very tip of his heart, right? Well, Dacheng's never really been an idiot. Zhao Yunlan, for all his extroversion, was hard to read. If he didn't want to show his joy or sorrow, his face would never betray him. A breath caught in Zhu Hong's throat, but a glance at Zhao Yunlan showed that the man still hadn't moved or spoken. His expression was calm, and the reflection of the Huangquan on his face made it as pale as snow, but not even a trace of vulnerable melancholy was visible. At first, Zhu Hong didn't know what to say, but people's hearts are unavoidably biased, and her heart held only Zhao Yunlan. She seemed to feel his every emotion as if it were her own. Zhao Yunlan still hadn't said a word, but the more Zhu Hong thought about it, the more frustration she felt on his behalf. Finally, under the double weight of his sadness and her own, she yelled, "He's setting you up to be in the wrong!" Zhao Yunlan's gaze finally shifted and landed on her. What was that? "He's deliberately setting things up so you're the one in the wrong," she said indignantly. "If he hadn't sent you mixed signals to begin with, you would have chased him for so long for... Would you have chased him for so long for no reason? You're not the son of the Emperor. If he hadn't oh so reluctantly given in, would you have forced yourself on him? On the soul-executing emissary? As if someone that powerful could be forced to do into anything." Zhu Hong's bold accusations made the black cat sway and slide off her feet. It seemed to him that her shattered worldview It seemed to him that her shattered worldview had been reassembled in record time. The cat was in awe of her ability to take a blow and come back swinging. It was as if she didn't even realize that she was talking about the soul-executing emissary, the same man who, once upon a time, she'd feared so much that she'd been scared to even open his letters. The more Zhu Hong spoke, the angrier she got, and the more her heart ached. She just couldn't let it go. He obviously seduced you on purpose, and then strung you along and played hard to get. He's just a fucking cocktease. If he can't be with you, why didn't he say so in the first place? He's obviously forcing you to... Zhao Yunlan took the last cigarette from the pack in his pocket, lighting it with a flick. After slowly exhaling a puff of white smoke, he asked mildly, "Forcing me to do what?" For a second, Zhu Hong didn't have an answer, but then a light bulb went off in her mind. "Forcing you to be unable to leave him," she blurted. "Forcing you to feel like you could never bear to give up on him until he's all you can see and nothing else matters. The way I see it, his intentions have been sketchy right from the start." Laughing lightly, Zhao Yunlan touched Zhu Hong's shoulder and steered her toward the pagoda tree. "Okay, now that you've got that all out of your system, hurry and leave." "Are you even listening to me?" Zhu Hong asked, stamping a foot. Zhao Yunlan's smile evaporated. He looked down, flicking his cigarette. "Do you want a gold star for that emotional insight, silly girl? You really don't know when to stay in your lane. Don't you know what outsiders shouldn't meddle in private affairs means? He's mine. If the two of us have a problem, it's between us, no matter who's in the wrong. An outsider criticizing him in front of me is no different from slapping me in the face. Me, I can't be bothered to take this seriously, but anyone else would have lost their temper long before now. That's enough talk, so hurry and go. Head home and get some good sleep. You've worked hard these last few days, so I'll make sure to pay you holiday overtime." Zhu Hong's voice was shaking. "Me? I'm an outsider?" "Obviously," Zhao Yunlan side-eyed her. "Three's a crowd in a relationship, you know." Oh, ooh, you asshole. Zhao Yunlan spread his arms helplessly. How am I an asshole? Zhu Hong could no longer avoid a truly cliched question. In your eyes, how exactly is he better than me? Da Qing, who had witnessed the entire scene, covered his face with his paws and came to the realization that he actually quite enjoyed melodramatic moments worthy of evening soap operas. His feline standards had tragically fallen. Whew. Now we're getting into the tea. All Zhao Yunlan could do was sigh. You're gentle, kind, pure, and beautiful, plus you're a girl. You're better than him in every way. Then why not me? After giving it a moment of thought, two dimples Also, that's funny that Zhao Yunlan has a preference for girls and on the bisexual spectrum of things. That's funny that he has a preference for girls. I was kind of guessing the other way. Not that I had him really extremely leaning one way or another. He was kind of similar to me and pretty middle of the road bisexual, you know, but even fairly middle of the road bisexuals tend to list off to one side. I'm just a weirdo in that I'm really straight down the middle. Hello. After giving it a moment of thought, two dimples blossomed on Zhao Yunlan's cheeks. I must be blind. The same goes for you, actually. Look, I'm a chain-smoking drunk. I'm annoying. I talk too much. I have a shitty temper. At best, I can pretend to be tender and considerate for about 3 days before I blow my cover. I'm great at wasting money, and I'm no help at all on the everyday life front. But I'm great at causing trouble. My own mother stopped being able to cope with me and kicked me out ages ago. Why is a beautiful woman like you so hung up on me? Ju-hong looked at him, tears brimming in her eyes. You're friend-zoning me. I guess. Zhao Yunlan's eyes slid half closed as he savored the last puff of his cigarette. It smoldered between his fingertips. True story. I'm too lazy to even wash my socks. I buy 7 or 8 pairs and wear them all once, and then I shake them out, sort them by how bad they smell, and wear them again. Then I finally stuff them into the laundry bag and send them off to be washed. Rinse and repeat ad nauseum. Every so often a sock goes missing, so its partner ends up among the mismatched. I didn't start wearing them in pairs until after Shen Wei moved in. As he spoke, the small smile lurking at the corner of his mouth couldn't quite be contained. A trace of tenderness shone through. Sometimes I don't have the first clue how he stands me. You probably can't even imagine how good he is to me. Listen, going forward, whether you go back to your tribe or decide to come back to us, you're always welcome. But let's agree on one thing. We're not bringing this up again, all right? The streets are full of men better than me. Don't you think it's foolish to forsake the forest and hang yourself to die on a single ugly tree? I feel like we all have a similar suspicion as to what exactly he's doing. As he spoke, he stubbed out the cigarette, which had burned all the way down. Taking advantage of his height, he put a hand on Ju-hong's head and ruffled her hair. What future could you have with a shameless gay guy like me? Come on, goddess. I'll let you spit on me to clear out the bad luck and release all your anger. Throw the fuckboy card in my face. Say you're too good for me and don't want me anymore. How's that? Ju-hong finally couldn't hold back her tears. As they streamed down her cheeks, she swallowed the lump in her throat and said, Shameless gay is right. Only ghosts would ever like you. Who but a ghost would ever want you? When Zhao Yunlan thought about it, what she was saying made a lot of sense. Her choice of words almost seemed to wish him and Shen Wei a happily ever after. He smiled at her. Of course only a ghost would like me. Then he reached out with a foot and nudged Da Qing's belly with a toe. Now head back together, you guys. Be careful on the way. Having said that, Zhao Yunlan stepped onto the Naihe Bridge without a backward glance. He went right over the railing, landing gracefully on the deck of a boat and scaring the faceless fairy ghost. Zhao Yunlan petted the ghost's shoulder. Hey bro, can I get directions? I want to go to the Great Seal. How do I get there? The fairy ghost's face was white as a sheet. Without a word, he jumped right into the Wangchuan River. Not even a bubble came up after he went under, perhaps because he didn't need to breathe. Zhao Yunlan, seeing that his words had scared a ghost into jumping ship, couldn't help rubbing his nose. He sat there on the ferry and contemplated the situation. Thousands of zheng below the Huangquan. He stared down into the calm Wangchuan below him, struck by a sudden thought. He folded Shen Wei's coat neatly and set it down in the boat. A weak spirit popped its head up from the water, wanting to reach out and touch it. Without sparing a glance, Zhao Yunlan said, That garment belongs to the Lord Emissary. Are you hoping some of his divinity will rub off on you? Frightened, the spirit plunged headfirst back under the water and disappeared. Zhao Yunlan rolled up his sleeves and pant legs and plunged into the river. In the distance, a woman and a cat cried out in surprise, while the shock that struck the wandering spirits in the water sent ripples spreading out. The Wangchuan waters were bone-chillingly cold. Everything in the netherworld felt like it had just been taken out of the fridge. Zhao Yunlan's watch, Clarity, emitted a gentle luminescence in the water. He looked further down and decided to dive as far as he could and head back up when he ran out of air. Right at that moment, the water dragon pearl around his neck suddenly glowed a brilliant white as a huge air bubble formed, surrounding him completely. Zhao Yunlan tried letting go of the breath he was holding and was delighted to find that he could breathe again. Unafraid, he dove further down. He traveled downward for some unknown amount of time. The pure white glow of the ferry boats was no longer visible. Pitch-black water spread infinitely above and below him. Clarity, now essentially a flashlight, kept radiating its glow, but its ticking had stopped. It was as though time itself had stopped existing for him. The swimming spirits around him gradually faded away. After a while, even the water was motionless, seeming to stagnate. There was no light, no sound, nothing. Zhao Yunlan's own heartbeat had become very loud, pounding like the beat of a drum. Even covering his ears would do nothing to block out the sound. After a while, even Clarity's light started to dim, and he gradually found himself enveloped by the absolute darkness. He sank and sank with no idea how long he had been descending. It felt almost as if this wasn't an absence of light, but some sort of new blindness that had come upon him. Just gonna end the chapter like that, why don't you? Sure. So, we're on page 87 for chapter 8. This is going to be around the time we take our break for a few minutes while we stand up. In this case, reheat my tea. And we just stand up, walk around for a little bit. This is your cue to go to the bathroom, grab a snack, pet a cat, do what have you. And we will be back for the second half very quickly, though, so that I can say this hopefully now and then also at the end of the stream. There will be no stream this Thursday, unfortunately. I had originally planned to do a Thanksgiving stream, but plans have changed. And the wife will be home for all of Thanksgiving. And she will be here, and we will be having Thanksgiving amongst ourselves. And so I have canceled the Thanksgiving stream for this year. But we will finish volume 3 before I take my official big mandatory stream. And there will be no more breaks for the next couple of weeks. So we do not have the stream on this Thursday. However, we will be back in about 5 to 10 minutes to get going with the second half of this stream. Give me 1 second to bring up the music that you guys will have, and you will hear that in just a second. Alrighty? Be back in just a few minutes. Welcome back. Let me get the screen reoriented so that I can see the chat without looking at my face. And let us continue to chapter 8 on page 87. Whew, we had to walk off all the tea, basically, over the break. Unexpectedly, the first familiar face Chu Shuja saw when he arrived back in Dragon City was Go Cheng Chung. Finally being freed of his shackles and reclaiming the belongings that the Netherworld had confiscated from him all those years ago had put him in a great mood. As a result, he'd found a wild burial mound and gone there to spend a few days of his Lunar New Year break in seclusion. But when he received Wang Zheng's email about Zhu Hong's plan to leave the SID, he immediately bought a standing room train ticket, that has a footnote, a train ticket without a seat reservation, and raced back to Dragon City, joining the throngs of people headed back after the holiday. The train station was bursting at the seams with activity. Chu Shujie walked around a bit, trying to find a taxi. What he found instead was Go Cheng Chung, bent practically double under a huge woven bag. Go Cheng Chung was hunched so far forward by the weight that his body almost formed a circle as he slowly inched along. A single glance was enough to tell anyone that Go Cheng Chung was unaccustomed to physical labor. Beneath the giant bag, he looked like a snail burdened by the weight of the world. No one who passed by could help looking back at him. Who knew what was in that bag, but as Chu Shujie watched, its contents forced a tiny split in the sturdy-looking nylon exterior. A woman selling corn on the roadside even kindly yelled out, "Hey, young man, your bag's about to split." Go Cheng Chung looked back, but his burden was too heavy. Worse, when he turned, he wasn't paying attention to what was underfoot and tripped over a wheel of a young woman's rolling suitcase. Flustered, Go Cheng Chung stumbled, trying to catch himself, but before he could even apologize, the young man beside the girl with the suitcase gave him a shove. "Watch where you're going." Can we just... This boy must be protected from everything, including himself. From the start, Go Cheng Chung had been unsteady on his feet. When he stumbled this time, the immense structure atop his back collapsed completely and its contents spilled out. A mind-boggling array of things clattered to the ground. Pots, bowls, ladles, basins, food, and clothing wrapped in plastic bags. And weirdest of all, a large wooden cutting board that was 60 centimeters across and 8 centimeters thick. He'd practically been carrying a miniature Walmart on his shoulders. The guy who'd pushed him had likely also just fought his way out of the crowded train station, which might have accounted for his incredibly short temper. He tisked, brow creasing with contempt. He took one look at Go Cheng Chung's worn gray clothes and mistook him for someone from the countryside, coming back to the city to do factory work. A tremendous sense of superiority joined the feeling of loathing, leading him to deliver a sharp lecture as he pulled the girl away. "How stupid are you to bring so many things with you when you know there'll be crowds like this? What if you break someone's suitcase? Can you afford to replace it?" Go Cheng Chung apologized again and again, scrambling to pick up his things. The nylon bag that had so valiantly given its life had burst open at both ends. Go Cheng Chung was sweating all over from the stress, but just then a pair of bony hands interceded, deftly tying the ends of the bag together in a double knot. Having turned the bag into a cloth basket, Chu Shujie loaded all the items into the middle and lifted it with one hand, holding the vast collection of odds and ends as easily as if the bag were empty. "Chuga," Go Cheng Chung exclaimed, looking up. If he'd had a tail, it would have been wagging hard enough to resemble an electric fan. From his perspective, the Corpse King was a savior who'd descended from the heavens. Chu Shujie ignored him. Eyes locked on the rude youth who hadn't gone far, and while still holding the huge nylon bag in one hand, he called out, "You there! Get the fuck back here right now and apologize!" When Chu Shujie's face took on that dark, menacing expression, he looked especially terrifying. He radiated the ominous ferocity of a criminal willing to throw away his own life. The young man, who had been so arrogant and domineering just moments ago, puffed himself up to seem as intimidating as possible, trying to hide his fear of Chu Shuja behind bluster. "What do you want?" Just as Chu Shuja was about to approach the man, Go Cheng Chung caught his hand and stopped him. Chuga, let's go. I didn't see her. It was my fault." Keeping hold of Chu Shuja's ice-cold hand, he smiled uneasily at the couple. "It was my fault," he repeated. The two people in front of them walked away, cursing, and completely oblivious to the great danger they'd narrowly escaped. Chu Shuja turned back and rolled his eyes at Go Cheng Chung. There was clearly something wrong with the kid's brain on top of his terminal case of blind virtue. How was someone with absolutely no sign of either a temper or a spine, even human, never mind a hot-blooded young man? Annoyed, Chu Shuja tugged his hand out of Go Cheng Chung's grip and pointed at the bag. "Thank you for giving us the blow-by-blow of exactly when hands were held, how long they were held, and then when they were broken apart. Thank you for that detail. I noticed that." "Is your family so poor that you have to come out here during Lunar New Year and sell stuff?" "No, I'm taking these things to someone. I wasn't expecting the bag to break halfway." Go Cheng Chung followed him eagerly, then was overcome with embarrassment. "Let me carry it. It's not far." Chu Shuja impatiently avoided the grasping paws and furrowed his brow. "Lead the way." Go Cheng Chung obediently took the lead, jogging along. Passing through the street in front of the station and making quite a few turns into a little alleyway, they wound up in a shadowy area of the prosperous city. Dilapidated single-story houses awaited them there, and further in, there was a ponytailed female student sweeping in a doorway. At the sight of Go Cheng Chung, she called out a joyful greeting. There was a winter break volunteer tag from a university hanging around her neck. Always a bit flustered when interacting with girls, Go Cheng Chung, and anyone alive or dead, Go Cheng Chung bowed his head unnaturally low. In a mosquito-thin voice, he managed, "Hello?" The sharp-eyed girl caught sight of the large bag in Chu Shuja's hand. She set her broom aside at once and pushed the door open for him. As they walked in, she asked Go Cheng Chung, "Did you register already? Did you print it out? We have to post it online and tag everyone to thank them." Nodding hurriedly, Go Cheng Chung pulled out a bundle of printouts. There were at least 7 or 8 pages detailing exactly what had been donated by whom and recording the donor's information. Street addresses, phone numbers, online IDs, and email addresses. The donations were an eclectic variety of things, ranging from different amounts of cash to cabbage, a large and strange collection indeed. As it turned out, this was a winter break volunteer movement called Helping Our Elders and Children, a joint effort by several universities and social organizations in Dragon City. Go Cheng Chung was involved with a facet of the movement that focused specifically on helping impoverished old people who were no longer able to take care of themselves for various reasons. Each group of volunteers was responsible for providing long-term care to a few elderly folks. Go Cheng Chung's weak communication skills meant he wasn't the best companion for the elderly or adept at raising donations, so he worked hard to do some of the heavy lifting. He'd spent this break serving as a delivery man. Because of course he did. Chu Shuja set the stuff down and then commandeered Go Cheng Chung's car, driving them both to 4 Bright Avenue. Go Cheng Chung's palms had been rubbed raw by the nylon bag. He sat in the passenger seat and silently cleaned them with a wet wipe. For once, Chu Shuja was feeling chatty. "You really do try to take care of everyone, huh? What's the plan, delivering all of humanity from torment?" Confused, Go Cheng Chung just stared at him with his naive eyes. "Does your family know you're doing all this?" Chu Shuja asked, shaking his head. "I've never brought it up." Chu Shuja didn't really understand him. "Did you burn incense on the first day of the Lunar New Year, then? Wishes tend to come true for people like you." Go Cheng Chung shook his head. He was completely satisfied with his life as it was. What could he possibly wish for other than his friends' and family's health? And right now, his friends and family all seemed happy and safe. He felt it was best not to bother the bodhisattvas unnecessarily. Chu Shuja couldn't help glancing over at him while waiting for a green light. Go Cheng Chung wasn't tall, strong, or handsome. No one was going to accuse him of having attractive features or of catching anyone's eye in any way. He didn't even own a single item of brand-name clothing. Everything he wore was probably a hand-me-down from who knew how many lifetimes ago. He was basically the kind of person you could drop into a crowd and never find again. His absolute lack of confidence meant he didn't have his absolute lack of confidence meant he didn't have even a shred of charisma. But when he simply sat down in silence, his peaceful expression held a kind of indefinable innate zen. Go Cheng Chung was just a mortal moving through the world, eating and drinking. He had no clue what cultivation was. He couldn't read a word of the Buddhist texts, and out of all the bodhisattvas and arhats of the world, he only knew two, Guan Yin and Ru Lai. Footnote: Guan Yin, called the compassionate bodhisattva of Goddess of Mercy, is the primary protector of the heroes in Journey to the West. Ru Lai is the Chinese name meaning Ho-ha-ha-ha, Tathagata. There's an accent over one of the A's, which wrecked my brain, which may indicate one of several Buddhas, here likely Siddhartha Gautama, and refers to having transcended mortal concerns. Damn. And even that much was only thanks to the popular television drama Journey to the West. Despite all that, Chu Shuzhe had the sense that Go Cheng Chung was quietly cultivating something wholly on his own. It wasn't luck for this life, or merits for the next, and Chu Shuzhe's keen perception and his own cultivation gave him only a vague feeling. He couldn't put a finger on exactly what it was. No, he couldn't know what Go Cheng Chung was thinking while doing so many good deeds, but he couldn't help feeling discomfort deep down. It felt like a sort of outrage, or a sense of indignation. All things being equal, shouldn't the fact that the kid's merits were a meter thick grant him a life of safety and happiness? Why had he been born with such ill luck overshadowing him? Everyone knew merits and sins were bullshit when it came to the Book of Life and Death, but did the Netherworld really need to flout it so blatantly? Chu Shuzhe stopped talking, and his fanboy, Go Cheng Chung, lacked the courage to start a conversation on his own. The two of them drove the rest of the way to Forbright Avenue in silence. At this point, night had fallen. Virtually the entire staff, both alive and dead, were in the criminal investigation unit when Chu Shuzhe and Go Cheng Chung walked in. The first thing Chu Shuzhe noticed was that every single person's eyes were completely blank, as though his co-workers had been collectively struck by lightning. Before he could ask what had happened, Wang Zheng turned to face them. Voice shaking, she asked, "Chuge, did you know that Shen Lao She, that Shen Wei, is the soul executing emissary?" Chu Shuzhe froze for just a moment, but replied calmly, "What won't that dumbass Zhao Yunlan do? Where is he?" Realized he's in way over his head and ran off. Off to the side, Da Qing meowed and said, "He jumped into the Wangchuan River." "A broken heart?" Chu Shuzhe asked. "What, did he off himself?" Da Qing and Zhu Hong's initial rush of panic had worn off by this point, leaving them mostly calm. Zhu Hong knew that Zhao Yunlan was wearing the water dragon pearl. She'd put it on him just before the trouble started, and that it would protect him from suffering any harm from water. If she was just a little more inclined to be suspicious, she would almost think that her fourth uncle had known something in advance. "I'm guessing he went to find the emissary," she said. Chu Shuzhe's gaze swept across the room. The only other person absent was Lin Jing, who was currently out of town. He stuffed his hands in his pockets and leaned back against the office door. "Let's start by each sharing exactly what we know. Things have been too chaotic recently. Let's pool our information." And then he paused abruptly, expression turning to one of horror. It sent everyone else's nervousness through the roof. "What is it, Chuge?" "Wait, Shen Wei is the soul executing emissary?" Chu Shuzhe's face had gone green. After another moment, he mumbled, "I've teased him so much." Evidently, sometimes one was crowned the King of Calm only thanks to a delayed reaction time. That was a scene break. While all that was happening, Zhao Yunlan had long since lost all sense of space and time. He was as blind in the waters of the Wangchuan as he'd been within the Great Divine Tree, but the experience was completely different. An indescribable pressure made him feel as though his temples were being squeezed together. Nausea and exhaustion that felt much like a blood sugar crash slowly filled his torso. His heart seemed on the verge of beating out of his chest, and the pulse pounding in his ears was almost unbearably strong and rushed. He didn't dare move his head too much for fear of simply passing out. Just as he was on the brink of collapse, Zhao Yunlan saw a trace of light. The light was dimmer than the glow of a single firefly, but to eyes so thoroughly accustomed to darkness, its brightness was downright piercing. He shielded his eyes, irresistibly drawn to that faint light. As he drew closer, he realized that it was a massive ancient tree. The branches seemed to stretch on endlessly, and the trunk might have been hundreds of meters in diameter, but the tree was withered. Its dried, twisted branches held not a single leaf. It had the coarse texture of something that had weathered many eons. Zhao Yunlan's very spirit shook. Was he looking at the ancient merit tree itself? He forced himself to stay alert as he followed the tree's trunk nearly a kilometer down. Eventually, he saw the ancient tree's roots, and then his feet, after so long floating downward, finally touched ground. His first move was to walk around the ancient merit tree in a huge circle, which brought him face to face with an old stone tablet. The faint glow of the tree was enough that Zhao Yunlan could clearly see the words carved into the stone, in a script he had never laid eyes on before, yet was somehow able to read. It read, "The imperial skies in Hotu, the unearthly land of the Gwei, the place of great disrespect." A name burst from his lips, Nua. His voice rippled out like a stone dropped in water, then dispersed like a sigh. In response, something stirred in the darkness. Entranced, Zhao Yunlan reached out and touched the edge of the tablet. White light flowed into his brain, and for a second he could see nothing at all. His gaze seemed to pierce time itself, coming to rest on a beautiful woman with a serpent's tail, her long hair trailing on the ground. His heart flooded with a sense of familiarity, springing art from the very source of his life, the recognition of both a mother and an elder sister. Her voice sounded near his ear, both familiar and strange. "Kunlun, what if Shenong was wrong?" she asked. "What if we were all wrong?" Wrong? Shenong? What had Shenong done? "But we can no longer turn back," she continued. "What? Wait!" He thought he glimpsed tears in the woman's eyes. Face filled with a bottomless sorrow at her imminent departure, she spread her arms toward him. Zhao Yunlan reached out, only for her to shatter into countless shards before he could touch her, like an image projected into the air. "No." Zhao Yunlan's mouth opened instinctively, but no sound emerged. In the next instant, the stream of time flowed around him. Zhao Yunlan seemed to find himself in some unknowably distant past, unsure whether he was Kunlun Jun or a mortal who lived thousands of years later. And he remembered. We'll show the art before we go to the other side of that scene break. Look at that beautiful tree. Oh, what? Sorry, I'm like totally in the middle of... Yeah, look at Zhao Yunlan at the foot of that unbearably beautiful tree. That's just so pretty, though. Ugh. Ugh. He kept watch over the pitch-black opening of the seal, sitting against the large stone tablet as he meditated. When boredom struck, he simply stared at the ancient merit tree and spaced out for the whole day. Later, a lovely but unsettling youth would always be close at hand, an ever-present shadow. At first, Kunlun Jun ignored him, but finally he broke down and said, "We're in your territory now. Why are you still following at my heels?" The youth's response was immediate and straightforward. "Because I like you." Kunlun Jun had spent his existence being told that he was absurd and impudent, day in and day out. Presented with the opportunity to say it to someone else, he seized his chance. "How impudent," he scolded, despite not being angry at all. The young king of the Gwei just looked back at him in confusion, with no idea how he was being impudent. For years and years, Kunlun Jun had been standing guard over the seal, bored out of his mind. He kept teasing, "What do you like about me, then?" The young king of the Gwei's desire for Kunlun Jun was plain as day, for he was yet unmarred by principles and morality. "You're pretty," he said bluntly. "I want to hide you away and hold you every day." That's pretty gay, Shenwei. Kunlun Jun couldn't take his eyes off the fearless little king. He wasn't offended. On the contrary, he was amused. "Oh, what the hell?" he cursed jokingly. "What are you even going on about?" The young king of the Gwei didn't understand why Kunlun Jun was looking down on him, but he thought Kunlun Jun would not say anything without reason, so he dropped his gaze in shame. Kunlun Jun gestured broadly. "Come, let me teach you about morals and justice, you unenlightened little thing." That was the end of the chapter, by the way. I wonder if that was a formative experience for Shenwei or not. We are, fittingly, on page 99 for chapter 9. Whew. Let me just check chapter length real quick, actually. Let me do page math here. Okay. Cool. Since we started somewhere in the mid-50s, I think it was like page 54, maybe even it was 55 for chapter 5. We were somewhere in the mid-50s, so I think this one chapter will put us right at the 50 mark. And even though I think it may technically mean that we end a little bit sooner today, we will still have hit the 50 pages. And since I have, like, the wife is home and still recovering and stuff, if we have to end a little early, that's fine. As long as we still hit 50. So chapter 9 will be the last chapter for today. Back when chaos had first settled, the great sage Shenong had personally descended to the mortal realm, where he tasted hundreds of herbs and saved many lives. He had become an old herbalist, spreading his teachings among humanity. Kunlun Jun had joined the crowd a handful of times and listened, and now he regurgitated what he'd heard back to the young king of the Gwei. His retellings made sense only half of the time, as he was mostly doing it to dispel the boredom, but the young king was utterly ignorant and hung on every word that came out of Kunlun Jun's mouth. To him, Kunlun's bullshit was the truth of the world. Slowly, a sort of mutually reliant affection took shape there at the maw of hell. We're going to repeat that line. Slowly, a sort of mutually reliant affection took shape there at the maw of hell. Who does she think she is? The young king's infatuation with Kunlun Jun didn't fade, but he had the innate capacity to feel embarrassment and shame. Listening to Kunlun Jun taught him that it was inappropriate to proclaim those feelings aloud, so he tucked them away in his heart. It's only going to get worse. Instead, he searched every day for ways to make Kunlun Jun happy. But alas, no matter how he tried, there was a limit to his imagination. There simply wasn't anything fun to be found in the place of great disrespect, with its thousands of li of barren land that boasted not so much as a single blade of grass. The entertainment options were limited to capturing two low-level Yochu and watching them fight and tear at each other until one devoured the other. There were, of course, other ways to entertain themselves, but that's not really on their bingo cards yet. This entertainment didn't appeal to the young king of the Gwei, however, so how could it have been enjoyable for Kunlun Jun? The young king went to the great effort of collecting a front tooth from each of 36 Yochu, which to his mind represented the 36 glorious mountains that began at Kunlun. He then braided strands of his own hair into a string and strung the teeth together into an extraordinary necklace, which he gave to Kunlun Jun. Kunlun Jun's expression when he accepted these 36 teeth was very strange, even stranger than the necklace itself. It was as if he had a toothache and wanted to wince from the pain, but was instead forcing his features into a peculiar smile, thanking the little king through gritted teeth. From his reaction, the young king concluded that he probably didn't like it very much. Either way, Kunlun Jun didn't wear it a single time, and if the little king mentioned it, he invariably changed the subject. But the little king's life was so bland and uninteresting that he couldn't think of anything else. Then one day, while sitting on a huge protruding root of the ancient merit tree, the young king remembered his fleeting glimpses of the mortal realm. "There's a kind of flower that looks like a bell," he said suddenly. "They come in all sorts of colors. If you get close and smell them, they have a very light fragrance." Kunlun Jun tilted his head to look at him. The simple, candid youth's face lit up with yearning. "They're so pretty. If I braided a chain of them, you'd like it, wouldn't you?" Sorry, I'm just having the extremely late realization that very specifically, Kunlun Jun and the King of the Gui and Chuga and Go Chang Chung, not dissimilar, you might say. After a silence, Kunlun Jun said, with what might have been a smile, "As long as I'm standing guard here, not a single Gui can leave. Have you been trying to get on my good side so you can escape to the mortal realm?" Realizing that Kunlun had misunderstood his intent, the young king of the Gui quickly shook his head. Seeing how flustered he was, Kunlun Jun couldn't resist teasing. "Oh, why then?" Because the young king met that teasing gaze steadily, but he didn't know what to say. The unfamiliar emotion surging and leaping in his chest seemed impossible to express. He felt that if he gave voice to the admiration he felt, the words would only come out coarse and unrefined, and even then he might not be able to convey even a fraction of what was in his heart. He became frantic. Unconsciously, his nails extended into claws. Frustration turned his expression both glum and aggressive. As people have said, once one was born into the world, most of the pain one endured, other than the hardships fate had in store, came from thinking too much and reading too little. Books were handed down by wise sages throughout history, but these sages of the distant past were born in the time of chaos. Lacking books to read or anyone to teach them anything, they could do nothing but stumble down their paths, full of questions for the world. It must have been an agonizing, anxious time when one lacked even the knowledge of how to share one's feelings with their beloved. Whew. But Kunlun Jun laughed out loud. Hooking a gentle finger under the youth's chin, Kunlun Jun softly kissed his beautiful clear forehead, then soared up into the tree's branches. What are you trying to do to this king? He's not trying to do anything, he's just doing it. He's just effortlessly fucking this king up for eternity. Doesn't even mean to. All right. Hello. How did I knock myself that far off course? The young king sat frozen in place for some time. There was no trace left of his aggressive aura. A blush spread from his cheeks to his chin and ears. Eventually, he stood up numbly, as though drunk. Even his legs were like jelly. Mind empty, he toppled down from the great merit tree's massive root. Having been born a Gui, even if he had somehow grown up completely differently from the rest of his kind, all he had ever seen and heard were the bestial, lustful copulations of lower-level Yo-Chu. The concept of a kiss was wholly new to him. Now, having experienced it, he felt enveloped by a cage of warmth, drifting lightly in midair. Not even in the waters of the Wangchuan could he float so freely. With no warning at all, the young king of the Gui turned and ran silently into the Great Seal, darting straight into the place of great disrespect. Dozens of years passed, during which he didn't show his face a single time. When he finally appeared before Kunlun Jun once again, he seemed to have grown up a little. He was slightly taller, nearly matching Kunlun Jun's height. The soft lines of youth had become more defined. Only his brows and eyes, beautiful as a painting, seemed unchanged. He stood before Kunlun Jun, cradling a ball of radiant golden fire in his hands. Kunlun Jun looked at it. "This is the soul fire from your left shoulder that was scattered within the Great Seal. I've spent 50 years gathering its flames." Holding it with tremendous care, the young king rubbed his face against it, not wanting to be parted from it. Then he held it out to Kunlun Jun. "I'm returning it to you." The smile at the corners of Kunlun Jun's lips gradually faded. Finally, he looked at the young man and asked, "And what do you want from me?" The young king didn't know what to say. He had no idea how to express what he ached for. Finally, he pointed timidly at his own forehead. "Can you do it again?" "Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh geez. Okay." Kunlun Jun studied him for a long while. Under his intense gaze, the boy didn't seem to know what to do with his limbs. Then, suddenly, Kunlun Jun reached out and tilted his chin up. But this time, it was the young king's lips that he kissed, ever so gently. He then took the boy's hand with a light squeeze, guiding the young king's long fingers closed around that ever-gleaming ball of soul fire. "I hold all the world's famous mountains and rivers in my hand, but what of it? They're nothing but a bunch of rocks and wild waters. Of all that I am, the only part worth anything may be my heart. If you want it, it's yours." With that, everything fell into place for the young king of the Gwei. For the first time, he knew that there was a way to refer to the thing he yearned for so deeply but had been unable to voice. Its name was heart, a single word with the power to doom someone forever. The Gwei were not living beings, but in that instant he could almost hear his own non-existent heartbeat. "This too, if you like it, you can keep it." Kunlun Jun patted the back of his hand. "My heart's blood formed the wick of the soul-guarding lamp, and my body became the lamp itself. Since only my primordial spirit is here guarding this place, I have no need for this. Do you still have the tendon I gave you?" The youth nodded hurriedly. "Take it out and let me see," Kunlun Jun said mildly. The young king pulled open his primitive garments and withdrew the tendon from inside the innermost layer. "Do you know what this is?" The youth paused in confusion. "It's my spine." The little king's hand shook, almost dropping what he was holding. Kunlun Jun took his wrist lightly. Through his hand, the mountain god of the great wild gently smoothed over the tendon he'd ripped from his own body. "I grew out of Kunlun Mountain, and before that, the axe of Pangu. My bones and muscle are connected to the veins of Kunlun, a pillar of the sky. Shake it, and the sky will change." As he spoke, he swiftly shaped a series of complicated hand signs with his fingers. The divine tendon was transformed into a stream of golden light that, guided by his fingers, drove straight into the king of the Gwei's forehead. In an instant, the youth seemed to hear the passing of millennia, accompanied by the sound of 10,000 great mountains rising. I will not make that joke. I will not make that joke. It was as though he suddenly stood atop an indescribable peak from which he was watching over everything. Every mountain and every stream was plainly visible to him. Under his eyes, they rose from the ground or sank with a great rumble, both the endless trickles and the surging torrents. Woven into all was Kunlun Jun's voice. "From this day forward, all 10,000 mountains will heed your command. The nature of your birth as a Gwei is difficult to shake off, but this tendon has made you at least half divine. You can now freely wander the 3 realms. I won't restrict you any longer." The youth's heart started beating wildly, driven by the suspicion that something more was about to happen. "I won't!" His own voice broke him out of the illusion of mountains and rivers and brought him back to reality. "You're here. I'm not going anywhere." "I won't be able to stay much longer," Kunlun-jun said softly, looking at the thousands of jang of endless water from the Wangtuan. "I'm just a fragment of my primordial spirit. I can't leave, nor can I stay much longer. Lately, I started to feel like it's about time." Panicked, the young king of the Gui demanded, "Time for what? Where are you going?" "I'm not going anywhere," Kunlun-jun replied calmly. "I'm about to die." "Impossible! How can gods die?" "Of course we can die. Pangu, Fushi, Nua, Shenong, they all died, didn't they?" Kunlun-jun said. "Now it's my turn." Hearing this, the young king of the Gui stood rooted to the spot. Then his expression turned fierce. "If the Great Seal didn't exist, if you hadn't sealed the 4 pillars in Nua's place, if your body hadn't turned into the soul-guarding lamp, you wouldn't need to die, right? Then I'll cut down this tree and rip this damned seal apart." The young king was sometimes like a round little puffball of a wolf. He both looked and behaved much like a puppy. If you reached out and smoothed his fur, he would roll over obediently and expose his belly for petting, but his mouth still held fangs. If he wasn't careful, those fangs would bare themselves and plunge into someone's throat, sealing their fate. Long before this, Kunlun-jun had accepted that the young king's feral nature would be hard to tame. Unbothered, he put a hand on his head and said gently, "To live forever and never die. Child, a rock that exists in a vacuum will last forever, but it's still just a rock, understand? Shenong said, if one doesn't die, doesn't perish, one cannot become a god. I used to think he was spouting bullshit, but now I'm finally starting to understand." The little king of the Gui shook his hand off. The last thing he wanted was to know that Kunlun-jun had understood. "Don't you dare!" Kunlun-jun spread his hands, which had begun to look a little transparent. Shocked, the raging youth grabbed hold of them, nervously turning them over as though it was the only way he could confirm that Kunlun-jun was still there. Not giving up, he said, "What if I cut down the ancient merit tree?" Kunlun-jun laughed. "Now that you've inherited the power of the mountain god of the great wild, you can cut down even the great divine tree if you want. The ancient merit tree is nothing. Then I can break apart the great seal and chop up the stupid stone that woman left behind, can't I?" Again, Kunlun-jun laughed. "You can, but I might die faster that way." "I can," the young king couldn't find the words. "I can kill all the people in the world," he snarled. "I can slaughter every living thing. I can strip every trace of green from the mountains and block even the smallest stream from flowing. I can litter the ground with corpses until there's no sign of life for thousands of li." Kunlun-jun lifted a brow as he teased. "Wow, that powerful." The king of the Gui tightened his grip on Kunlun-jun's hands. "You're not allowed to die. I can do anything. There's nothing I wouldn't do." Shenong was right about another thing. Kunlun-jun's expression turned stern and cold. "I should have killed you long ago and prevented any future troubles." The young king pursed his lips and glared back stubbornly. But then Kunlun-jun smiled again, warm as the first gurgling waters of a brook once winter's ice thawed, reflecting the green of life, budding along its banks. Excuse me? We're reliving that. But when Kunlun-jun smiled again, warm as the first gurgling waters of a brook once winter's ice thawed, reflecting the green of life budding along its banks. I'll quit frightening you. Listen, ever since Shenong borrowed the soul fire from my left shoulder, or no, ever since the great war of gods and demons and Nua's creation of humans, or maybe even as far back as Pangu splitting the earth and sky, all of this was predestined. I was destined to die right here, right now. Even if you bring the sky and earth together again, you won't accomplish anything but making it so that I die in vain. You can't stop anything. The rims of the young king's eyes reddened. You don't understand, said the mountain god of the great wild. What we call fate isn't some divine constraint. It's a single moment when you're confronted with tens of thousands of possibilities. In that instant, You can ascend to the heavens or descend into the earth, but in the end, there's only one path you'll inevitably choose. I didn't understand it when I was younger either, but when you grow up, you'll probably understand too. I actually really like that angle on Destiny. Destiny may have just been fundamentally redefined for me. Fuck, we don't have time to go into all that. Oh. The truth of his own powerlessness finally sank in for the young king. All his gifts were for slaughter, destruction, and devouring. All the realms had shaken when he came into existence. Ghosts and gods alike feared him, and what use was any of it? The one he cherished most was still going to slip through his hands. As Kunlun-jun watched, the youth's expression of murderous intent crumbled. The young king hadn't yet learned how to contain and suppress the emotions in his heart. Once his sheer shock began to fade, tears took its place. The little king broke down in wretched sobs. I'm literally writing down this page number about the Destiny thing. Hang on. "107, in case anyone else was curious. Kunlun-jun looked at him with an almost loving sympathy and a pang of regret. It's a pity I'll never see the great beauty into which this little beauty will grow. Thousands of years of wind, frost, rain, and snow passed in the blink of an eye. Everything was the same, but the people were gone. Well, that's a scene break. Ruined. This poor boy. Just absolutely demolished him for any other possibility in the universe. Zhao Yunlan let go of the rock of the Great Seal with a jolt. Suddenly he realized someone was behind him, and they laughed lightly. Zhao Yunlan immediately pulled out the soul-guarding whip and turned, pressing his back against the stone. Warily, he looked at Ghostface, who was but 10 steps away. Ghostface looked him up and down in turn, shaking his head. A smile broke out on his mask. Ghost, whoa, sorry, whoa, that took me a second. It just happened so casually. Hang on, hang on. We're gonna start this scene again. Zhao Yunlan let go of the rock of the Great Seal with a jolt. Suddenly, he realized someone was behind him, and they laughed lightly. Zhao Yunlan immediately pulled out the soul-guarding whip and turned, pressing his back against the stone. Warily, he looked at Ghostface, who was but 10 steps away. Ghostface looked him up and down in turn, shaking his head. A smile broke out on his mask. I've heard that all of Nua's memories are contained within. What did you see? Zhao Yunlan scoffed. Why would I tell you? Ghostface approached slowly. Mimicking Zhao Yunlan, he put a hand on the stone tablet. Tens of thousands of years ago, he and I were twin kings of the Gui. There was no difference between us, and yet somehow he managed to gain Kunlun-jun's, your, favor. Now, millennia later, one of us is within and one of us is without. One of us rots in jail and one holds the keys. The upturned corners of the smile fell. Ghostface lowered his voice, pausing after each word. But the Great Seal is about to fall apart. That's why I can come and go as I please. In the end, everything must die, and you are no exception. Kunlun, if my idiot brother hadn't ambushed you all those years ago and confined your primordial spirit, if he hadn't forced you into the reincarnation cycle to become a lowly mortal, relegated to living one life after another, you would have dissipated into nothing, just like the rest of the primordial gods. In this world, nothing can last forever. The only constants are death and chaos. As he spoke, he touched Zhao Yunlan's face with one ice-cold finger. The sigh that escaped him was almost a groan. But death itself was set ablaze by your soul fire, bringing us into existence. Things that are neither living nor dead. Isn't that such a fascinating coincidence? Zhao Yunlan's brow furrowed. He tilted his head slightly, avoiding Ghostface. By this point, he'd heard too many versions of how he'd lost his soul fire to know which account was true. Didn't Shenong borrow my soul fire? How did it appear later in the place of great disrespect? And what do you mean, it set death itself ablaze? This line of questioning seemed to throw Ghostface for a loop. His mask went blank for an instant, as though he didn't understand what Zhao Yunlan was asking. Then realization dawned. He flung his head back in wild laughter. So that's how it was! And here I thought he was so pure and innocent. What a virtuous facade he put up, when really... He was cut off by the soul-executing blade slashing down at him, wielded with enough hostility to split him in half. Ghostface took flight and dodged, but the blade's momentum drove even Zhao Yunlan back a few steps. "Shenwei," he exclaimed. Shenwei reached to grab him, face set with willingness to kill. "How could you come alone to a place like this? Have you lost your mind?" But before his hand could reach Zhao Yunlan, Ghostface appeared out of nowhere and blocked him. Turning into a puff of black smoke, he slammed into Zhao Yunlan's chest, managing to keep Zhao Yunlan from wielding his whip. He then immediately transformed into countless wisps of black smoke, cocooning Zhao Yunlan inside as he let out a maniacal laugh. Then the laughter stopped abruptly. The smoke dissipated as Ghostface resumed his usual form, but Zhao Yunlan was gone. Seeming astounded, Ghostface quietly said, "Someone took him away. But who?" And that's the end of the goddamn mother chapter. Sure. Why not? Oh, I can look at the bonus. Okay. I can look at the bonus art now. Bonus colored art now, evidently. That's the colored art. The colored art. Oh, hello. Oh, shut the hell up. Nuh-uh. Hang on, I'm just checking to make sure that that's the only... okay. Damn, hang on. I'll hold it up for you. I just have to be careful so that the bookmark doesn't fall out. Hang on. Look at this. Look at that. I have to be gentle because it's literally just the cover. The bookmark's gonna fall out, I know it. Look at this. They have full color motherfucking art of that first kiss. Shut up. Well, I'll be damned. Focus, please. Thank you. Look at that. Look at that beautiful art. Holding the glow. Are you... Hello? Oh my god, with the little glowing butterflies floating all around them. Stop. They give us everything. The art people really give us everything in this. Why did I take the bookmark out? Oh, because I was going to tell you what page and chapter we're on. We're on page 111 for chapter 10 that we will be picking up 1 week from now. There are usually streams Tuesdays and Thursdays from 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time so that we can read gay things. This Thursday is Thanksgiving, and what was a usually scheduled stream has been canceled because the wife will actually be here. So she and I are going to have Thanksgiving. I guess more of a Friendsgiving thing as we let, friends come and go as they please. And I hope you have a lovely holiday, however you relate or don't relate for Thanksgiving. All choices are extremely deeply valid, Jesus Christ. And we will be back here next week for apparently the real kickoff to happen. Yeah, this makes sense. We're about a quarter, kind of getting towards a third of the way through the final volume. It was about time for Ghostface to show up. So that's what we get to do a week from now. I hope you guys have a lovely holiday, lovely rest of the week, and I hope it treats you well. And I will see you guys for Chapter 10 of Volume 3 of Guardian 1 week from today. I love you all very, very much. Please take care of yourselves.